Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Nutanix Weekly from XenTegra, the podcast with context, where we talk about all things Nutanix. This is episode number 80, a big milestone for us. We're getting close to triple digits, guys. I am joined today with co-host Harvey Green, CEO of XenTegra Gov. Harvey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well for a Monday. How are you?
I'm doing great, and a little better than Jirah Cox, who's also on the phone with us from Nutanix. Jirah's up in the blistery winters of the North Midwest, I guess, Northern Midwest.
I mean, I wasn't complaining. That's a value judgment on your part about that I'm doing something less than great.
Hey, I tell you, snow, like you just showed out of the window, is very, very hard for us Carolinians to handle. So
something we've all kind of implicitly opted out of for the most part. Yeah,
that's right. That's why we live down here, closer to the equator.
My kid, when I send my kids pictures, they're so jealous. I'm like, guys, it's completely wasted on me, right? This stuff's all just annoying and messy.
Exactly. It just makes it hard to get from two places. You're not out building igloos, snow castles, and snowmen, so it's not a lot of fun, is it?
I complained about having to scrape my windshield this morning just driving to the airport. It's such a minor inconvenience.
You just crank it up earlier, Jirah. You just crank it
How
up.
How dare the weather at all affect my transportation?
We've also got Ben Rogers here from Nutanix. Ben, how you been?
I'm doing well. Jirah, I do have a question for you. Do you have your milk and eggs? I'm sure up there you could buy that at this time of the year.
Believe it or not, there are places in the world where I think snow falling doesn't trigger a mass milk and egg buying event.
Yeah, I was going to say, for anyone outside of the Southeast, when we hear snow's coming, the milk and bread aisles clear out. Yeah. Everyone runs and gets those two necessities. But I've never had eggs on bread as like a thing, so I'm not quite sure why those two things are the things that sell out.
I don't know. I think it's weird. I go get charcoal and meat.
I just make
if
sure
my power goes out, you know where to find me.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense for you, Harvey. I mean, we know you're going to have food, so I know I'm coming next time we have issues.
Hey, let's do it. It is built-in food and smoke signal at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say, Harvey, we're going to be looking for the tower smoke coming and go that way. Go towards the fire. The closer you get, the more you'll smell it.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Well, it's funny. I mean, we're talking about food already. I'll tell this quick story. I saw on LinkedIn today that Applebee's has joined the subscription revolution. They've offered a date night subscription package, a year's worth of meals for the low price of $200, and they sold out immediately. So their website crashed, and that I think is the tie into today's topic. Building apps once and deploying anywhere. Maybe Applebee's needs a web scale sort of architecture, and next time they try to sell subscriptions, maybe they can keep the website going.
Wait, I have questions. I'm sure we all do.
Yeah.
We're all engineers here. That's my first thought was that's cheap. My second thought was that's too cheap. Is that a weekly entitlement?
It was a weekly entitlement.
Oh my goodness.
The article, as low as $2 per person per week, which was an incredible deal, which also is why it led to a frenzy on their website, and their website went offline shortly after they launched the promotion. So,
wow. So if they had some more robustness and some capacity to burst on demand for services.
The question I'm asking was, did they have the website contained to one vendor where it really wasn't an Applebee problem? It was a vendor problem, or were they able to spread that across multiple vendors at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Be a question asked there.
I think the question really to be asked is whether or not they have the burst capacity when everybody shows up to come get their
site
weekly helping.
Well, I'm with Jirah. The first thing you said was that seems very cheap, and
It
yeah, I
is.
did the math on it. It was $30 entitlement per week for food and drink, and so you do that every week, and that's like $1,500. So it was a heck of a deal. So shout out to Applebee's for bringing back date night.
That's awesome.
So let's keep going today.
You're gonna get me in trouble.
Yeah.
So some of this,
let's try to
I'll tell you
navigate
this.
us out of the weeds then.
Harvey, you
I'll
heard
tell you-
Harvey. They're already sold out. We need to keep recording, Harvey.
The digital revolution is definitely taking man step further, but there's sometimes I feel like it's a little knock on us. Like I'll give you an example. I'm in Chick-fil-A, and I came to the realization with my 13-year-old son that it was faster to order via the app than it was to stand in line. And so there was part of me that was like, okay, I get the technology, but at the same time, I was like, to the point that somebody made, it's going to be interesting to see how Applebee's delivers on this subscription model, especially if it overflows their on-prem environments, So again, just an interesting for a little bit of an older gentleman here in the conversation. I love technology, been a big fan of it, but there's sometimes I hang my head and go, oh, where is this going?
Well, but I think this is an important conversation to have too, because I pulled up to the McDonald's drive-through, and the first question was not a greeting of hi, welcome, anything like that. It was, are you using the app today? So, this is a thing. I mean, between subscriptions and between mobile enablement for all of their customers, we're seeing the world change. And the way you do that is by building apps, which is what we're talking about today. So I think it is very, very appropriate to kind of start out talking those things. So, cloud native is a completely different way to architect your applications. And the promise is you get to build your apps once and deploy anywhere. That's the title of today's blog post that we're talking about. Once again, it's from Mark TR. Shout out to Mark TR from Nutanix. You've provided us with great conversation the last 3 podcasts.
That's the hat trick.
It is a hat trick. That's awesome. So let's dive right in here. For anyone watching on YouTube channel, you can see it on screen, but we want to dig in a little bit here. And like I said, cloud native's different. It's something that brings a lot of benefits. Cloud native is supposed to let your application scale up. They're supposed to be able to be self-healing. What are some of the other promises, Jirah, of cloud native? I'm drawing a blank here.
Rapid scaling, even at like the layer, at each layer of the application, right? So like I could scale out just the web server or just the application handling logic independently.
Yeah. Instead of big applications, breaking things down into smaller parts that talk to one another and scale independently and have a better resiliency. So yeah, it definitely talks about, that goes into the Applebee's website or the mobile app for Chick-fil-A or McDonald's. All of these are using this cloud native type approach to their applications to help us serve up our food. When we talk about cloud native, a lot of times we also have to talk about containerized applications. So as you break up those applications into little pieces, you run them as a container, which to me is a just-in-time application, right? Everything the application needs to run packaged together in one immutable form so that it's the same every time, everywhere. And that's where you get that deploy anywhere. I know I'm preaching a little bit here at the beginning of the podcast, but a lot of infrastructure folks find this foreign, don't really understand how containers work and things like that. But this is coming into our world fast. So let's dig in on the blog post here. Jirah, cloud native definition and distinction. Can you help us a little bit more with that? We've talked a little bit about some of the benefits, but what are we bringing to the table from a Nutanix platform?
Matching the and following along with the way Mark has structured the article here, right? So it really matches like sort of like customer expectations of when a cloud native application is published, right? That there's some level of like orchestration, right? Something's watching those components. When I sort of in my mind, I almost picture like the Apollo 13 scene, like dumping out all the pieces on a table and saying, "This is what we're going to work with to build this thing." What's tracking all of that, right? Are things put together in the right order? Do I have the right in my mind, I picture like all these various layers of the cake, and each layer can be the size that it needs to be, right? Compared to, say, like a traditional application, old school, built in like a virtual machine, where of course, if I need 3 VMs or 4 VMs to run the app, I can run 5, I can run 6. But if every VM is doing every piece of that, right, like the web front end, or even a load balancer before that, and then application logic and a backend database connection, all those pieces might not be equally used in every single VM, right? So then scaling at the unit of the VM is not perfectly efficient, right? There's some waste inherently in that kind of design. So with more like a containerized application with cloud native, right? Now I can scale out. I need more web front ends, right? I just need more load balancers, I just need more backend database nodes. And with that, I get more specificity. But then also my container orchestration platform, right? Commonly these days, Kubernetes used for that, is monitoring the health of all those layers, right? Did I have a web server instance get sick or unhealthy or get wedged? I'll spawn a new one. Or is there a new version, right? When my developers push out a new version of the web front end, then bump and roll through that environment to go from we're all on version X to now we're all on version Y, but with the service staying available the entire time there. So imagine that paradigm, right, of those containerized apps offering that linear scalability, the allocation of resources, and then something that's worth kind of zooming in here to define for our talk here today, right? Cloud native versus native cloud services. Often the article does rightly call out used interchangeably, and that certainly can work, but it's worth kind of distinguishing between those two things.
Yeah, so as we talk about that, cloud native versus native cloud services, Harvey, I'm going to throw it to you. Let's take native cloud services. I mean, what are examples of those? What do you think of when you think native cloud services?
I mean, I always start with some of the ones that people know. Netflix, Hulu.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I say Netflix, and Netflix wasn't born in the cloud, was it?
No, they shipped shiny discs around for a long, long time.
They did. They actually just stopped doing that not long ago.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of the common ones that are out there. I mean, ultimately, this gets down into understanding and making sure that you've got a way that you can replicate your methods across multiple providers, across multiple platforms. You kind of talked already about looking at a containerized world, making sure that things are predictable, making sure that they're identical for the most part, as much as you want to make them identical. This just spreads to now let's do it, not just do clones in one place.
Right.
I'm using clones loosely there, but now let's talk about doing it in more than one place, across different platforms, across different providers. Let's expand, past where you are today.
Yeah, so I guess is it safe to say cloud native is a style of developing, and a native cloud service is really more that app. You use Netflix as the example. It's the deliverable. It's that thing that lives that people consume from. But cloud native, it doesn't live in one place. It's the way the app's developed so that it spans across the globe in lots of different locations, hyperscalers across multiple regions.
Yeah, the cloud native is almost like an application design pattern. The native cloud service is usually a bit more like vendor specific, right? Can represent like this might be a unique offering I can only get from one cloud provider, or a specific implementation that only exists within one cloud provider.
Absolutely. The article continues on here talking about APIs. Again, and we're talking to mostly infrastructure folks. That's who I guess listen to Nutanix Weekly mostly. APIs to server jockeys, we don't always quite understand what that means, but the more scripting and things that we've done in our years, I think it's starting to make sense. Ben, I mean, what's the as we talk about APIs and things like that, what does that represent, I guess, from your
So,
perspective, talking to customers?
well, for me, I'm going to give you a personal story with this because I've been an infrastructure owner that has struggled with this kind of cloud native way of thinking. And where I've kind of come with it is you've got to think of exactly what you've described here, microservices. You don't have VMs that, like in traditional environment, you'd have a VM for a database, you'd have a VM for an application, you'd have a VM for a web front end, and you could kind of manage them on a VM level. Well, those VMs are now containers, and those containers can really live in any environment that you want. And kind of going back to now, it's kind of a double-edged sword for me. One, you've got the application, the application being developed itself. So that's kind of what Applebee's got on the money. They got the application right. What it sounds like they got wrong was the ability to get that application to scale out. And
Yeah.
so it's really, to me, as an infrastructure guy, thinking about now I've broken the application down into, instead of VMs and the VMs having a specific service, now I have to look at, microservices that are contained with containers, and how do I get those containers to roll across an environment? One thing that I do see, I'm going to switch my consulting hat on now and talking to customers, is a lot of customers don't get their applications across multiple cloud services. They're really siloed. And so what you see with a lot of companies is they might be doing multiple things in multiple cloud vendors, but it's really siloed. This app is stuck in this silo. This app is stuck in this silo. And where they want to get, and what they're talking to us about, and what we have the capability of delivering, is breaking that silo and saying, hey, I've got an application to developer. Help me get that pushed out or scaled up or scaled out to these different places so I don't have to refactor it each time. So I've struggled with what you've talked about of an infrastructure guy trying to get this concept of microservices, APIs. Now I could be dealing with multiple database containers, multiple web front end containers. Plus, I've got to deal with getting the application developed itself, to also seeing my customers go, hey, I'm in AWS consuming their containers, but I need to deploy some Microsoft. I need to deploy some GCP, and I need to go to a third party like Equinix and get bare metal and do it on my own. Those are the challenges that I see our customers facing these days, and how I'm looking at changing the paradigm of the way I think about it to traditionally of, here's a VM, how do I get that VM scaled out?
Yeah. So you're talking about those services again, and you're talking about consuming those services to the business's benefit at the end of the day. That's another huge part of this. When we think about native cloud services, I think S3 for storage. I think maybe something like Redis cache for caching across applications. I know from my conversations with my app developers in the past, those services are consumable things that they can then leverage and use to write software and store data in. Those are the native cloud services I think we're talking about here too. Things that may exist only in a particular cloud provider. So, Azure doesn't have S3, but they have Azure Object. So different protocol, different API, different language that it talks, but similar capabilities, right? It's still object store at the end of the day. We talk a lot about Nutanix Unified Storage, and Jirah, trivia question: what protocol does it talk for object?
Well, it uses the S3 protocol. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I got there.
Yeah, shocker.
Way to go, pop quiz.
Yeah, sorry, I was not trying to throw you a curveball. But yeah, I mean, it talks the S3 protocol, and Yeah, that's because that became synonymous with how you talk to object store. Amazon created that, and that API has really become the gold standard, right? So I read a book, I think it's called Team Topologies, and it talked about organizing people like we organize cloud apps, create an API between teams. And that's the first time an API made sense to me. As an infrastructure person, sometimes I thought of an API as code or this place that you go to do things and submit work. But that was the first time that I really thought about an API being a contract between two things. And so
Yeah.
it's just a documented thing of how these two teams work together, how these two applications work together. Jirah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think I like that concept a lot. It has, and to go even back and dredge up some old terms, right? A lot of flavors in there of like DevOps, right? Or a very cheesy one that I use when I describe Nutanix is that we allow like IT leaders, technology leaders to hyper-converge their teams as well, right? Like the same way that your application doesn't wake up one part of it and then do a job and then put it to sleep and then wake up the next part of the application, right? They work together. Same way that you don't, we help move stuff besides like procurement or deployment, I should say, from like, okay, network provisioning, and then stop that task, and then some other single-threaded task like storage provisioning, right? And then OS provisioning. It's how can these all work together faster, right, to pull off the end goal.
So Harvey, I'm going to throw it to you. As we're talking about the APIs and things like that, you create your new application and now you want to run it everywhere. Well, what's that enabling piece there? I mean, that's the Kubernetes, I think, from my perspective. But I mean, I lost the question there somewhere. I don't know. Did you figure out what I was trying to ask there?
Sort of.
Answer whatever question you want to, Harvey.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah, this is the wild card where I just get to say whatever it is I want.
42.
No, I mean, ultimately, yes. You have your app that you've built that you now want to be able to run anywhere. I like too how you described it as a contract between two parties. I mean, ultimately, I look at it kind of that same way. I almost describe it as a language we've agreed to speak. Mm-hmm. Because through the API, you're both asking for something and getting something in return. You have to be able to speak the same language in order for each other to understand, what's going on there. So definitely the contract between the two, because you have to agree on the terms of how you're going to do things. So I like that description too.
So I think it is important, and last sentence here in this first section says, it's important. Not all cloud native apps are built the same, and some are more portable than others. So
yeah,
this reminds me Java, right? Java was supposed to be the language to end all languages. Write once, run anywhere. Sounds very familiar to what we're talking about today, doesn't it?
It does.
So we're still chasing that. We all know developing in Java, you have different versions, different compatibility levels, things like that. So
there's your contract on display.
Right.
That's exactly it.
That maybe there's some argument to how never mind. That's a bad analogy. So let's go through the challenges of cloud native applications, Jirah.
In no particular order here, the article highlights duration and costs associated with development life cycles and testing, meaning that how can I test and release faster, right? Increase the team's velocity of shipments. Team skill sets, right? Like, who needs to learn what new skills to support this kind of new process, moving from like traditional applications to cloud native ones. Difficulty deployment, monitoring, management, right? Like what's doing what does right look like? What do I need to manage? What are my alerts or critical indicators of performance? Capital and operational costs need to optimize and efficiently monitor all those resources. Cloud lock-in, one of my personal favorites, right? So like, especially when people use stuff like Kubernetes, which is fundamentally an abstracted portable framework for developing applications, and then they never port anything anywhere, right? Like you deploy, with a portable framework and then never move anything. Because some of that API lack of interoperability, right, from provider to provider across clouds. And then, hey, is even the supporting underlying infrastructure fundamentally correct to actually run the systems as they ought to be, right? And can we support now even more non-disruptive updates of layers of the stack here as we sort of add more layers of the stack to what we're going to vend to our applications?
So Ben, I'm going to go to you, and I'm actually going to hit this first one because we talked about application velocity for teams, getting things out there faster. I mean, if we get back to our original example, talking about being in line at Chick-fil-A and it being faster to order on the app. I mean, what happens now that you've got an entire rebuilt, because Chick-fil-A has gone in and they have rebuilt their physical brick and mortar stores now that they've transitioned to this app and application dependent thing. So now what happens when your application goes down? I mean, that velocity to fix it's pretty important, right?
Well, before I answer that, I want to add one thing that's not in these list of challenges, and that's securing all of this. We thought securing VMs was difficult, and to be real honest with you, we never really have quite figured out how to do that extensively. Now we're talking about how to secure containers when containers are built to be rapidly deployed. And so no knock on the author here, but man, that is one bullet point that I'm like, that's even a challenge. The security people are kind of scratching their heads going, how do we get to where we can secure these containers as they're being rolled out in these environments? So that was one thought that I had. As far as the question that you asked me, it's a struggle. I mean, it really is, to where I see that, like, the first thing here with the duration and cost associated with some of this stuff. I mean, that is something that we've had a lot of companies struggle with. And I think that the first point kind of ties into the bullet point of skill sets for these are not, very valid. I mean, not very available these days. And competition for this skill set is high. And even if you are able to contain the skill set or acquire the skill set, another problem I'm seeing people struggle with is the silo. They might be able to do this in Azure, but that doesn't mean they can do it in AWS. Yeah. And then my last point, and this is not a knock, but it's kind of funny, is setting up the infrastructure. I think, your first example with Applebee's, they're seeing that bullet point come to life there. Somewhere in their remediation, they're going to see where a bump in the road got tangled here with that last point of, did they have the capacity in the wear out to scale this thing out as it caught fire?
Yeah. I mean, as we talk about that application life cycle, a quicker time to value, you find a problem, you can do rolling deployments. You can have the app auto update and roll through that without any downtime. And so you can iteratively fix things on the fly. That's a huge benefit. But you hit a number of great things. I mean, the skill set's there. I mean, we're not going to see ads for someone with 20 years of cloud native application experience, application dev experience, that they don't exist. For a lot of organizations, this is the first time that they're trying to do something like this. Harvey, I know this is one for your customers in the gov sector. The increased capital and OpEx costs is pretty tough. I mean, you want to talk a little bit about, ways, I guess, that you are helping customers handle that and strategies there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of applications being built. There's a lot of requirements around how they can be built, where they can be built, and ultimately, they want kind of the same things that anybody else wants. They want it to be able to work. They want it to be able to scale. And if they need to burst or do something different, they want the ability to do that, even if that is just for, hey, the data center's down, we need it to live somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean everything has to go to cloud. I mean, this is we are having a lot of conversations around particularly cloud, but that also goes for being able to do it in your own data centers, in your own private clouds, not necessarily just the public cloud you're used to. So beyond those pieces, I mean, again, being able to have it set up to work from anywhere, that anywhere actually means anywhere. It's not confined to just public cloud. So we have a lot of those conversations as well. Go ahead, Jirah.
No, I think that's spot on, Harvey, right? Is like, we're sort of, to make a couple of concepts like super concrete for our listeners, right? We're thinking and talking about like super deep, like thinking deep thoughts about application design patterns and like deployment techniques. But to make a couple of things like super crystal clear, like this is bringing the sort of traditional goodness of cloud really anywhere, right? Like, because there are some customers that will certainly be like, say, public cloud averse, like they don't need to stay in their own data centers or their own colo for governance, compliance, autonomy reasons, cost preferences, whatever that may be. And this is saying, that's fine, that's perfectly valid, but you're also not left behind from like a needing to modernize those applications really, and really actually not even needing to modernize perhaps. It's more like supporting the application teams, right? It's not like about like wrestling and soul searching, like, should we go down this path or not? It's your app team's probably already expected. Mm-hmm. How quickly can you offer it as a service, right, in the catalog to support them, right? So that you get to be part of the team and not bypassed to make that happen, right?
Yeah, 100%. That all of that is just basically coming up the chain, right? The application owners are becoming that way because the consumers of those applications are already that way. Mm-hmm. They want it to work from anywhere. They always want it to work. If a million people hit the app at the same time, they don't want it to crash. They still want it to be able to work. And so that pressure has made its way back to, the application builders, the application owners. And now that pressure is moving back up into the infrastructure owners. They need to be able to do the same thing. We need to be able to develop anywhere, run anywhere. We need to have the platforms and things in place. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, patch rapidly, patch at any time. I mean, it really goes back. It's such a trite example, right? But like, think back 10 years to the Phoenix project, right? Like going from updating the website once a month to 100 times a day.
Right.
You have to do it, right? Saying no to the business there isn't valid.
Well, yeah. I'm sure Harvey and Philip are seeing this. I know Jirah and you have seen this, particularly in the manufacturing and healthcare space. A healthcare facility goes and buys a new EMR, chances that EMR is going to be container ready, and that's how it's going to be deployed. Whether they're going cloud or staying on-prem, they've got to be able to handle a containerized environment. And I know the term smart factory is definitely getting its place in manufacturing, but essentially the manufacturers are going to have that technology next to the machines that are doing the manufacturing process. And so in a lot of those applications that are being built, they're being built in a containerized environment. So when I think of cloud native, I just don't think of AWS or Azure or something that's living beyond my four walls. I think of more of an architecture of, here's an application that's now microservice that's got to be deployed in some kind of container environment. That container can live on the edge of my manufacturing floor or could live up in my cloud services that's handling my customer relations. It's more of an infrastructure development model to me now than it is a location.
So I'm going to ask this question. In my past, I had some management folks who were concerned that Kubernetes was just another buzzword, that it was a marketing thing and not a real technology thing. We've seen, containers aren't new. We've seen other people try to solve this cloud native design pattern. But Kubernetes is a little different. I think because we're getting what you're talking about, Ben. We're talking to actual independent software vendors, ISVs, who are releasing software that run in containers on Kubernetes. They're expecting that as their version of a hypervisor, their version of a substrate to deploy on top of. It's not the same as what we've seen with virtual appliances and traditional VMs yet, but we are starting to see that shift where it's not just the in-house apps that are being delivered that way, but we're talking about particularly services. You can do Redis, you can do, an object store. I mean, we have those things that are delivered already in that way. But yeah, I do think that that's what's different is we're seeing the shift from client server to cloud native and actual software that's supporting that today. It's not just for your custom applications.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to your contract comment from earlier. Ultimately this boils down to the contract between the application developer and who's providing infrastructure. You used to be able to just go out and pick out your own processors and I want RAM that's at this speed, not at this speed. I want memory that does this, like I want hard drive space that does this. Like you were able to pick all of that out. You no longer are able to do that if it is being hosted for you by some other party, be it public, private, colo, whatever. So eventually, you have to get to a different standard. And this is kind of that standard. You have to, make sure that there's something, someplace, somewhere, some technology that you can agree on, because the application owner still needs someone's or something to provide what they need, but they need a way to express what they need in a way that is understood by the person providing.
Yeah, that expected level of abstraction from the platform is always rising, right? And the level at which we abstract below it is always supposed to be getting more and more automated, right? Like fewer and fewer human touches required to govern and care and feed for every level of the stack there.
Yeah, I mean it's also a value conversation, right? To the application. I mean, organizations that are doing their own app dev, that's not a cheap endeavor, right? And how do you want to use that app dev's time? You want them to focus on differentiated business value, not writing software to store object values. There's something we can use for that, not something to do caching. We can use that for, there's open source projects and software that exist for some of those common problems. You want them focused on your really hard business problems. So as an organization, what's the answer? What do you do?
Well, Philip, I want to make a comment on that because the last statement that you just made, when you say, where do you want your application developer? I had the pleasure of sitting down with a CIO he was not an IT CIO. The company had moved him over from supply chain. And the reason they did was they wanted him to bring that analytic vision to IT and kind of get them to the next generation of level. And when we first sat down with him, he did not want to talk about technology at all. What he wanted to talk about was how he could make the people that were using the software have better access to information, and so a lot of his questioning didn't come from here's what's running in the background or here's what my applications are. He was actually in the mindset of how do I make the people that are using this data, how do I give them a better experience? And so you just kind of hit the nail on the head that I'm sure he is going back to his developers or whoever, procures getting the data in the hands of the users. And those are the conversations he's having. Our hope, selfishly, is that he'll find something in the infrastructure that will keep him from delivering that. And he'll have to come back and talk to us about that. But it was interesting to hear his taking his new job, coming from non-IT and going, how do I take this IT animal and really make it work for the company's benefit?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're all in the business to do, right? I mean, we're there to help the business succeed with their goals. If we're doing our jobs right, I guess. I know that my conversations tend to focus on outcomes with our customers a lot. We want to engineer something that gives you the outcome you're looking for. And every organization's slightly different in how they get there with that problem. So yeah, I mean, 100% agree with you, Ben.
I do want to circle back to another thing you asked. Now, I'm not smart enough to answer the question of, has Kubernetes set in to be a technology that's going to stay with us?
Yeah.
I will say this. Jeremy Myers, my old boss at Citrix, put up a PowerPoint slide that showed all the companies that were developing for a Kubernetes platform. And every year they revamp this PowerPoint, and all you see is more and more and more and more organizations that are moving that way. And so if I had to predict, I think the market is pushing that direction. But again, I don't know Kubernetes, and I'm not smart enough to read that crystal ball, but I do see at a market level there's a lot of push towards that technology. And again, I'm having conversations with customers now that are going, we're not developing, we're going out and buying, and the platform they want us to run on is some kind of containerized platform.
Yeah, well, and I think that part of the conversation that you're talking about, where you're seeing the rapid adoption by multiple software companies for Kubernetes, is like what we've seen with Nutanix objects. It talks S3. At some point, that protocol, that substrate becomes the standard, right? And I think that's what we're finally seeing in the industry is that widespread adoption where one, VHS versus Betamax. For most of our listeners, that may be a reference that doesn't land because they don't remember physical movie tapes. But there used to be that thing. There were two different formats, and so one format ultimately became the winner. And I think we're seeing that with Kubernetes in terms of how you orchestrate containers. Harvey,
it's funny. I would think the exact same thing. And what was funny is as you were going through that, I was sitting here literally like, what was the alternative to Laserdisc? I could not think of. I had the exact same thought, but I could not remember what the other one was. But you're exactly right. This to me is that kind of moment. And I mean, honestly, I think that the reason why it didn't take off faster is because it was so hard for everybody to stop saying or start saying Kubernetes. It was harder to pronounce. Well, I don't know what this is. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, past director of infrastructure trying to execute on this with an organization trying to turn the curve, become cloud native. This isn't easy.
No. It's expensive.
And it's expensive, but there are ways to make it better. There are ways to actually get there from a strategy standpoint. So I do want to try to bring us home. So Jirah, what's the answer? What could we do? What if?
So what if, imagine a world, right? Where, with the Nutanix hybrid multi-cloud platform, right? The way that I really drive home the value is, we've highlighted so much of the complexities and decision points, criteria. Here, the other reality we also live in is that it's not like you wake up one morning and all the apps flip the switch at one time in parallel and all go containerized together. It might take 100 meetings to get your first containerized app in production. Your second one might take 10, right? So the velocity increases once you do take the first step, but then the time you spend doing both still can be quite lengthy, right? It can still be years, right? Some apps will never leave VMs. Microsoft isn't shipping, identity services in containers yet for you to go run on your own. So the answer really becomes a platform that can help you do both, right? Answer the needs of developers for what's around the corner and keep running the apps that already run the business, right? Whatever that blend is, if it's 5% containerized growing to 10 and 20 and 30% containerized, or if you can get all the way to 100, more power to you. Whatever your blend is, the value is the platform, right? That can let you run that blend of applications, containerized and VMs with data services included, anywhere at the edge, in your data center, in a colo, in a partner data center, or in public cloud, and let you offer these outcomes to the business in a unified, easy way, right? Of wherever you want to run the app, however you want to run the app, we are here for you, keeping that easy, simple, and secure.
So Ben, I'm going to tee you up. Hopefully it's a softball. Who can deliver that?
Oh, well, Nutanix can. There's no doubt about that. That was a softball. I was just gonna drive home. If you just looked at the edge capabilities our company has, the fact that you can run what Jirah was talking about, multiple services in one cluster. The other thing that I'm seeing Nutanix, it's interesting coming to work for the company and then work with other companies and see how the product kind of reshapes an organization. You turn your IT department into a microservices organization in itself. You don't come to it, you come to it asking for problems, and it has services that it can deliver. It don't have to like think of building infrastructure. It's
Right.
just, going, hey, here's what we offer, tell us what you want to consume and we'll let you consume that. You take away the infrastructure piece of it. And I think because of that is the flexibility that our platform offers. So who can do it? Nutanix can. How can we do it? We can do it by having microservices that can be delivered pretty much anywhere that you need it.
Absolutely. And to tie it back into our API conversation, right? On Nutanix, you're running files. They talk the SMB or CIFS protocol. You're running objects. They talk the S3 protocol. You're running Kubernetes. They have their APIs to be able to interact with and deploy and run and operate container services. So again, you have those contracts defined to run on your software, no matter where your software is at. That's the power of it, and it really is a powerful platform. That's why I like this particular topic and this particular discussion so much. It's a little different for our infrastructure sort of focus, but I love this because it is a platform, and I know I bring that up all the time, and it's usually my answer when Andy asks me something. Nutanix is a platform. That's where I go first. It's more than hyperconverged, and that is the truth that I truly believe. This is a perfect example of where that comes into play. Um, you know, um, I have to think. We spend a lot of time running infrastructure projects that sometimes fail. We're working with physical components that fail. And so that failure planning is always part of what we do. You know, we see it large and small, right? The Applebee's example from the beginning, Harvey. What if they weren't in multiple regions? We have to think about failure. What is that answer then? Now that we've got the Nutanix platform, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to a little bit the conversation we had right before this, where we talked about the fact that it's expensive to move into this type of deployment. I would also argue that it is very expensive if you do not. The expensive is going to happen. Either you want to do that up front, or you want to do that in failure, like the Applebee's example.
Hey, is it controlled expense or is it uncontrolled expense, right?
Exactly. The same thing with Netflix. We kind of talked about that too. The cheaper version of Netflix was to go to Blockbuster. We all see how that ended.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you have the choice of whether or not, to your point, Phil, controlled expenses that you have predicted. And done your best to contain to the front end so that you don't have to worry about that back end failure. Looking at moving to a platform like Nutanix is the same way. You can start migrating to something that will work across locations, across providers, on-prem, colo, public cloud, private cloud, wherever. Just start moving down that route, or you can stay with what you're doing now because it is less or deemed less expensive or less trouble or less work since you don't have to do anything different than what you're doing. And ultimately that decision will come back.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it really just makes it easier to operate cloud-like everywhere. That's
Yes.
kind of the way this helps you. You get that cloud native experience on-prem. As someone who ran budgets and looked at costing and stuff, I'd have heartburn running dev and test in the cloud sometimes. It's a big line item when you see those real dollars going to
Yeah.
that. I would prefer to run that on-prem maybe, or in a lower cost environment, maybe another service provider.
Yeah.
Now you have that choice and you can make those decisions behind the scenes and control things a lot more. I like that approach, like that connotation, Harvey.
Yeah. And
So
in the end, I mean, you want, as the provider, the infrastructure provider, you want the same thing that the application owners demanded of you, that the customers demanded of them. I just want it to work. It doesn't matter where it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much more you have to burst to. It doesn't matter how many places you have to put it so that it always works. I just want it to work. And you need a platform that can do that for you and that can handle being in all of those places at one time, but still giving a consistent experience. And
let's not forget one thing, guys. The platform will also tell you how much it's going to cost for you to do all those things. So, Philip, kind of going back to your comment of heartburn, we could predict that heartburn for you up front so it wasn't such a shock to you, or you could manage it.
And not just that, you're also giving customers the ability to control that cost and reduce that cost.
Yeah.
That's
a whole nother conversation, my friend. Just that alone could take up an hour.
It is a complete different conversation, but it is worth mentioning. I mean, we work with a lot of customers and, using native cloud services. Back to the beginning conversation, native cloud services to host versus running on Nutanix. Nutanix can often actually save and provide a cost savings in public cloud. So running Nutanix on hyperscalers, it is a great way of basically having a set run rate and possibly a good savings, a good chunk of money back of your budget. So this has been a great conversation. I do want to run around real quick. I'm going to give each of you a quick second. What's your key takeaway from today? Jirah, you go first.
Nutanix, the application platform for today's apps and tomorrow's apps. And if you want to see what this looks like, you can actually go to Nutanix Test Drive right now and click around and see a live environment of what this can look like for you.
Love that. Love that. Ben, you next.
I think if you need flexibility, I mean, that's just the biggest takeaway I have. It not only, from a cloud perspective, traditional cloud perspective, but also on-prem. And if you want to get a third party, man, I love the way Equinix is doing their model where they give a cloud experience, give you, connectivity right there at the cloud, but they still control your own destiny with owning the software and doing the IaaS piece of it with them. So I think if you need flexibility, you need portability, and you need to simplify the environment, future-proof it, this is the way to go. It's my personal opinion and what my takeaway is from today's podcast.
Harvey, what's your key takeaway?
And anytime, anywhere. That's ultimately what everybody wants. Anytime, anywhere. And in order to make that happen, you've got to have a common contract, like you spoke of earlier. Basically a common platform across the different providers and the different ways that it can be provided so that you can get a consistent experience for ultimately the end user.
So my closing comment, this is not Java. This actually lets you write apps once and deploy them anywhere. This actually is something you can do today. It's not vaporware. it is something you can bank on and build your applications on with trust. And that's what I love about this. It's not something where we're painting a perfect picture. All this infrastructure underneath the hood, it's complicated. There's thousands and thousands of hours of engineering that went into making all of this happen. But I love that Nutanix does provide these services to customers in a simplified way with lifecycle, with all of the things thought out to operate this long term. So, yeah, I think today's been a great discussion. I know it's a little out of the box to be talking apps and app dev, but guys, I do appreciate you joining us. And until next time, this has been episode number 80 of Nutanix Weekly. I want to say thanks to Jirah and Ben from Nutanix. Thank you, Harvey from XenTegra Gov. Until next time, join us on our next episode. Everyone have a great day.
See ya.
Our pleasure. Thank y'all.